The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello everyone and welcome to this PractiTest webinar on testing risk management. My name is Joel and I'm PractiTest Chief Solution Architect. Next to me is Noah, our marketing manager. She's going to be maintaining and managing everything on the back of this webinar session. Okay, so again, I wanted to thank you. This is actually a series of webinars that we're running, and we basically choose today's risk management webinar coming from the results of the state of testing survey, something that we were actually, if you're not aware about the state of testing survey, I really recommend you to go into our QA blog and download it. It has incredible, insightful information about what's going on in the testing world and testing as a profession. And one of the points there talked about stuff that testers do other than testing, and it was about risk management. And so the idea came about testing risk management, and what is it and how to make it better. And so this is what we want to do today. In any case, more formally, what we want to achieve on today's webinar is basically go around and cover general topics and actually more insightful information about risk management around development and testing. I want to talk a little bit about how to catalog and how to manage. Oh, wait a second. Apparently, we're still
Apparently,
seeing
we're
only
still seeing only
the first
the first
page of the
page.
session. Just
Just a second.
I'm trying to
I'm
make sure
trying to
that you
make
can
sure that you
actually
can
see the
actually
screen
see
that
the
I
screen
want
that
you
I
to
want you
see.
to see.
Um,
Um,
Again,
Again,
here, go
click
to
here, go to
webinar. Sorry
webinar.
for
Sorry
that.
for that.
Okay,
Okay,
now we're ready.
now we're ready.
I
So I
apologize for
apologize
that.
for that.
And
And
well, going back
going
over to
back
what we
over to
want to
what we
cover
want to
today.
cover today.
I want to
I
go
want to
first
go
of
first of
all
all.
by defining what we mean by risk management around development testing. It's actually something that maybe not everyone's familiar with, and so we're going to go around it. Then we're going to be talking about how to catalog and how to manage your project risks and your testing risk out there. That's going to be like the most part of the webinar. And then I want to talk a little bit about adding to the value that the QA is actually providing to the project by taking hold and managing the risks in your process. Okay, and as always, at least for me, the most interesting part of the session is going to be the questions that you have. So if you have any questions that you're going to be thinking about as we go over the session, please go ahead and ask them using the chat that you have in there. And at the end of the session, we will go over them and try to answer all of them. And if we miss some questions, then we will answer them via email, obviously. So before we go over the topic, a little bit about introductions. Starting with me, just a second here, trying to see what's going on here. Again, technical issues with GoToMeeting. Yeah, a little bit about me. So first of all, well, obviously my name is Joel. Professionally speaking, during the last 18 years, give or take a couple months, I've been working in the testing field, starting obviously as a tester, moving into a test lead, QA manager, director, so on and so forth. I blog. I actually have a nice blog that we try to work on. It's the QA blog on PractiTest, and occasionally I get to speak in venues like I don't know, Star East, Star West, conferences in Europe and in the US. And I also work as a solution architect within PractiTest. And that basically means that my role in the system it's to talk all the time with customers to understand how they're working with the system and try to improve it based on their feedback. Okay, so I'm all the time working with testers, and that's actually a pretty cool job. And my other hat in practice basically to manage the QA of our team. And as I mentioned in some of our previous webinars, because we work on an agile environment, and this means that I get to manage all the testing, not necessarily the testers, because we have a lot of development testing going on in the system. Now, a little bit off topic, maybe yes, maybe no. But a couple years ago, I actually got diagnosed that I have a little bit of OCD or obsessive compulsive disorder, I think that is in English. And I think that that's one of the best things that a natural risk manager should have. And I will talk about that in a couple of minutes. So if you have OCD, this is your chat. Just kidding, even if you don't. Um, a little bit about PractiTest. Well, obviously, it's we're sponsoring this webinar series, but Practice it's a SaaS ALM solution. ALM as in application lifecycle management or a QA management system, and basically what we're trying to provide it's a simple and intuitive QA management solution that will still allow you to manage your process in a methodological and flexible way. Obviously, it's a system that integrates very, very well with tons of other stuff. For example, if you're using Jira, then you can still manage your bugs in Jira and manage all your tests in practice. If you have automation, Selenium, stuff working on Jenkins, stuff like that, well, you can see all the list in there and obviously on our site about the stuff that we do. And that's also my team. We provide the best darn supporting system. And again, we really invite you to go ahead and check it out. But before we move on and we talk about the topic itself, I want to start with a question. Okay, so I want to go ahead and ask you guys, everyone who's in the session, if you have a risk management process team or system in your organization. Okay, so Noah's going to help me out here by popping up the question. So the question is again, if you have a risk management system, and again, the answer is I'm not sure. No, we don't. Yes, but it is managed by either the project team, development team, or any other team other than yourselves in QA, or yes, and it is managed by the QA system. Okay. So people are still voting. And again, go ahead and if you can, go ahead and vote. It's very important for the rest of the system here. Well, I see that a lot of you have already voted here. Okay, wait, they're telling me here to wait a little bit more. I'm gonna give a couple more seconds for people who want to continue voting. Okay, guys, so the results are in. And wait a second, I think that you're not seeing my screen right now. Let me just make sure that you can see it. And again, we have the issues with what you should be seeing. Okay, wait a second. And switching between all of our screens. There we go. Okay, so the results are in, and actually, they're a little bit more surprising than I thought it would be. We have about 17% of people saying that they're not even sure if there's risk management going on in their projects. We have 35% of people saying no, which means that more than half the people either don't have risk management right now or are not sure if they have risk management. So that actually means they don't have. We have about 43% of people saying that they do have it, but it's being managed by someone else in their team. And only 4%, about 5% of people saying that yes, and it's being managed by the QA in the teams. And basically, this is quite amazing. And you will see how much of an opportunity that is obviously for the people who don't have it or not sure if they have it. And obviously, even for those who have it and it's being managed with other people on how you can actually make use of what we're going to be learning today and improving the way that you're going to be doing it. Okay, so let's move a little bit forward and let's start first of all by making sure that we're all on the same page here. And I want to start by defining what do we mean by risk management. And in order to do that, let's define what do we mean by risk. Okay, it's a little bit of a high level definition, but a risk is something. It's either an event, something that might be happening within the project, outside the project, anywhere actually in the context that may have a negative effect on your project's outcome. Okay, anything that might go wrong or that might cause something to go wrong, it's basically a risk in your project. Now, to try to make this a little bit more concrete, then I like to focus always when I'm talking about risks on what I call the project triangle. It's not actually a pyramid because there's no base and top, but it's mostly a triangle, which means that, and many of you might be familiar with this, every project is actually defined by the content that the project's going to have, the schedule that you're going to be working based upon, and the cost that you're willing to take upon yourself. So if you think about it, well, obviously, as the project starts from the early stages, then you're able to play with this more. You're able to define what you want to get into the project or out of the project or the scheduling of it, and then either you get the cost based on the people who are going to be attending. Basically, you can play with these parameters. Okay, but a risk is something that will have a negative outcome on any of these parameters that you see here. Okay, now it's usually easier for people to try to understand risks when we catalog into two main types. Okay, and again, something that you see fairly most of the time when you talk about risks in the industry is that people tend to catalog risk into two main types. The first type is what we call product risks. Okay, a product risk is a risk that may affect the stability of the product. Okay, basically a risk in this case we refer to as something that may be buggy in the system. Okay, so if you have a risk of making bugs, of having bugs in the system, then that's what we call a product risks. And basically, this is the easy type of risk. This is the risk that we're mostly used with because in order to mitigate this risk, this is the reason that we actually test. But we need to understand that there are other types of risks, okay? And these are the risks that we actually call project risks. And these are risks that might not really affect the stability of the product, but they might affect either the schedule or the cost of the project. And in here, we're talking about stuff like delays. We're talking about scheduling conflicts, bad estimates, hidden cost of any type of thing that might actually harm the delivery of the project on time, on schedule, on target, basically. Okay, and these are also risks that we will know and we will need to know how to manage them and obviously to mitigate as much as we can. Now, once we understand what is the risk and what type of risk we have, if we're talking about risk management, then the question that actually arises is who should manage the risks in your project? Okay, and at least in the way that I see it, that person should actually be you. And who is you in this case? Well, for me, you is a QA professional, someone who's actually in the quality assurance team and the testing team. And I will talk more about it. Why is actually the person in that place, you in this case, are the optimal person in order to manage the risk in your project. And again, how you can actually do it in a better way. Now, moving forward a little bit, let's talk about the risk management process. Okay. Now, when we say risk management, we're basically talking about a number of operations, a number of things that should be done. And if I try to look into them again, to distill it down into very specific things, we're talking first of all about keeping track of all the risks. Okay, you're going to be having risks in your project, things that might hamper you, might damage your project, and you need to keep track of all of them. Okay, not only does that person need to keep track of all the risk, you need also to know how to focus the team on the relevant projects at any time. And a way that I like to visualize it is basically, well, obviously we all were kids at one time or another, and we all played Super Mario Brothers or stuff like that. And remember how you see in the screen like 2 or 3 steps ahead of you, and you always need to concentrate only on those that are important. If you try to concentrate on the ones that are far ahead of you, then you're going to be missing the ones that are close to you. And so you're going to be missing the important ones. You should only concentrate on the risks that are relevant to you at this point. And I'm not saying disregard the other ones, but make sure that you're not missing the ones in front of you because you're actually focusing on the very, very far away. It's very important to go over every risk and understand what are the repercussions if this risk was to materialize. Now, it's important to understand a risk doesn't necessarily mean that something will happen, meaning let me give you an example of the risk. We might be working with a team that is very new and doesn't know the technology. So a potential risk might be that it will take us more time to learn the technology than what we thought of previously. So that is a risk. If it was to materialize, we can have multiple ways that it will materialize. One of them, it might be that well, we will be delayed in a couple of days and it'll be okay. More or less, we'll be able to handle that. Or it might be the case that it will basically double our delivery schedule. So that's going to be a very, very big risk. So you need to basically understand what's your worst case scenario and also what's your probable scenario in order to be able to manage your risk correctly. Now, a very big part of risk management is also to understand who is the owner of the risk. And the owner of the risk is the person who's going to be more capable of well, avoiding the risk if possible, mitigating it if necessary. And it's always important to make sure that, again, people know that this risk is on me, even though it's a shared risk that might be happening to multiple teams in the company. Who is the person who's going to be leading the efforts for the risks? Obviously, if we're talking about avoidance and mitigations, then you need to have an avoidance plan and a mitigation plan. An avoidance plan is going to be, let's take the example we did, like it's a new technology, we don't really know what's in there. So an avoidance plan might be to take one or two people in the team and send them to an intensive course on how that works and make sure that those people are going to be able to, first of all, understand if the schedules are okay and pass along that information. That might be an avoidance plan. And a mitigation plan might be to have a company that knows that technology and can hop into the team and basically help us out by having more people who know that part of the technology in the team if needed be. Okay, so you need to have both types of plans and having them in place, obviously. And last but not least, some people might actually be placing this in the first one. It's as the project evolves, as you are more aware of stuff that is going to be happening, then you're going to be adding new risks into your risk table. And we're going to be talking about the risk table, and obviously removing the irrelevant ones. Okay, so if we already finished the part of the development that was related to that new technology, then that is not such a risk anymore. So we can actually move forward and take it off the list and concentrate on the other risks that are important, but also add additional risks. For example, if all of a sudden we realize that, I don't know, a lot of people have been sick for the last couple of weeks and we're going to be needing more work people in the company, then again, to add those risks as you actually move along. Risk is something that it's going to be evolved. They're going to be coming, jumping at you and going out of the screen all the time as your project actually comes along. Now, a very big part of the risk management process, it's something that we call the risk management meeting. Okay, and a risk management meeting might be the place where most of the action actually takes part in this. Now, what's a risk management meeting? Basically, a risk management meeting, it's a periodic meeting. Okay, again, based on my experience, it can happen once a week. Once the project starts going over to the late parts of the project, then you might want to have it more than that, once every 2 days, something like that. It's a very, very quick meeting. Okay, it's a 20, 30-minute meeting. It's not a work meeting. It's mostly an update meeting and a brainstorm meeting. So it should be carried very, very short meeting. On the other hand, you need to have representations from the important people in the teams. You need to have someone from each team who will be able to basically represent that team and each one of the disciplines that you have in your project. The people in there, you should have two types of people. And obviously, if you can have one person covering both sides, it's better. But first of all, you need to have people who know sources of information. Sometimes it's the technical people in the team, people who actually know what's going on. But you also need to have decision makers. Okay, if you're going to be having managers who need to make the decisions on what to do and how to do it, then you will also want to have them in there, because the risk management thing is basically a decision-making meeting that you need to have in there. The agenda for these types of meeting, it's very straightforward. First of all, as I said, you're going to be having a lot of risks in your plate, so you're going to go and review the top risks. If you're going to be reviewing the top 5 risks or the top 3 risks, it's really up to the project, up to what's relevant at that stage. Obviously, you update your risks. If something is happening, if the probability of a risk happening is going to be there, then you need to update what's going on in there. If a risk is materializing, then we need to say, okay, this is what we're going to be doing. This is our contingency plan. This is how we want to add. As I said, new risks that are going to be adding, then the risk manager should add those risks and remove any risk that you have in there. And obviously, as any meeting, any productive meeting, you should actually review the action items. First of all, the action items that you had from last week, but also define the action items for the next week and what corrective actions you want to have if those risks are going to be materializing. And at the end of this, you should come up with, or the outcome of this meeting, it's what we call an up-to-date risk table. Okay, and a risk table is basically a table of risk, and I'm going to be talking about that. Send it by email, post it wherever you want, but you need to be able to say, hey, this is what we came up with. These are work action items from this point forward. Now, I talked about a risk table a couple times already, so let's start by defining what it is. The risk table is going to be either a virtual table or something very concrete, something that you can actually share with everyone in the team that is going to be having very concrete information. It's going to be having, obviously, the name and the short description of your risk. For example, high instability on a specific area of the product that we were not building upon, or key people from the team who have been leaving the company and it's important, or even the option of it's taking more time than we thought of to deliver this feature. So those are the risks that you should have in there. They should be in there. As I mentioned before, who is the risk owner? And it's very important to have the risk owner in there because people from everyone in the team should know who that person is, so they can go to him or her, obviously, talk to them, understand what's going on, how can they work. If the risk is changing, to obviously talk to them, stuff like that. It's very helpful to have different risk categories, and it really depends on the type of project that you're working. Sometimes you can talk about technological categories, sometimes business categories. It really helps you to try to organize your risks into buckets so that it will be easier for everyone, especially the non-technical people in the team, to understand what's going on in there. Okay, so do take that into account. Also important is going to be something that is called the risk level. Now, the risk level, it's basically the summarized information for the importance of the risk, how important it is for the company and for everyone at this point. And it's usually calculated by some sort of wager between the likelihood of the risk of materializing and the consequence of that risk materializing, what actually would it do to the system, okay? Now, there's no good or bad way to go about this, but I wanted to bring an example. Again, it's an example that I've used in the past of how to calculate the risk level of your risk, where if you can see on the left hand, you have the likelihood. Okay, it's almost certain it's going to happen. It's likely, possible, unlikely, or rare, versus the consequence. Okay, if the risk was to materialize, nothing will happen. Okay, it's going to be okay. Nothing will go wrong. We can just leave it as is, all the way to it's going to be severe. Okay, we're not going to be able to release the product. Forget about on time. The product won't go out the door if that doesn't work, or it might go out, but we will have a backlash of people complain about it. So basically with that, you should create a list that everyone can actually look into it, and it will help you to focus your team on the most important risks at any time. So it's one of the most important things to agree upon when you're managing risks. And again, you don't need necessarily to take this example. There are tons of examples on the internet that you can use. Just look for a risk level table, and you should be able to get a couple of ideas how to work with them. And something that I personally like very much to add on my risk management tables, even though many people don't have them, it's a date or a milestone. Okay, and that's basically trying to point some reference into those risks, meaning this risk can materialize on this milestone of the project, or it can materialize up to this date. After this date, it might not be relevant, or if we pass the date, then it's going to be materialization should be actually obvious to everyone. For example, if the product is delayed to QA after I don't know, August 3rd, then we're going to miss the deadline no matter what happens. So that's going to be your date or your milestone. And again, it's important just to give people a reference, okay? Because depending on the level and the milestone, people will be able to understand, okay, so this is important right now, or this is going to be important 2 weeks from now. So I'm going to look at the ones that are important at this point. Okay. And again, this is more or less about how to manage your risks and how to actually do the day-to-day work with risk. And as you see, this is not a full-time position, but this is a very important position because you should actually be helping people to understand what's important in your project. And I don't know how many of you were present on the previous webinars, but if you were not, then go ahead and check them out. We really recommend that. But in one of those webinars, I was talking about the real job of the QA manager or the QA. And I was saying, meaning we're not here to run tests. Tests are our tools. But what we're here to do is basically to provide visibility into the project and the product, and obviously to make decisions on how to continue working. And one of the most important things are not only what we have right now in the product or the project, but what are the risks that are ahead of us? What might be important in the future, so that each one of us, or obviously every one of the stakeholders in the project, can actually know what's coming on in the future and be prepared for that. Okay, so risk management is not a full-time position, but it's a very important position that if your company is not currently managing your risks, is basically driving with a blindfold. Okay, you might know the way, or driving at night with your headlights off. You might know the way, you have driven it 1,000 times, but maybe someone left something on the road, or maybe someone is passing the road, and if you're not managing your risk, it's basically just I don't know, trusting faith on being able to release your project. Okay, but again, that was a segue on risk management. Let's get back to more concrete stuff. Now, one of the things that people have asked is if there are any specific risks or any specific tips and tricks on how basically to work on risk management in a more effective way. And well, there basically are. The first of the, oops, okay, apparently I'm going to do it this way. The animation actually came the other way around. But the first one of them is to make sure that you have 100% transparency and visibility on what you're doing. I was talking about the risk table. Um, it should not be a state secret or a management secret. You should make sure to share it with everyone on the team. Okay, risks are important. They actually affect all of us and every one of us in the project. So make sure to have an up-to-date risk table. If you have a project dashboard, online project dashboard, kitchen monitor, something like that, have a page for your risks. Okay, you don't need to have all of them. Have only the important ones, but make sure that everyone's aware of what might go wrong in the project, so that everyone can actually contribute in order to make that happen. Now, if you're working on agile teams, something that works very, very nicely, talk about risk during your daily stand-up meetings. Okay, you don't need to do the whole risk review, but if you're talking about a task that is related to a risk, talk about it. Make sure that people are aware of them. If you have three outstanding risks that you're actually thinking about, just mention them. Make sure that everyone knows how it works. That's the idea of stand-up meetings. Make sure that everyone's up to date. So that might be a very quick, takes less than a minute and makes a lot of difference. A very interesting thing that I've seen throughout my work experience is that sometimes people are not comfortable about raising a flag when you have a risk, because basically people see risks as other colleagues or coworkers not doing their work okay. I'll give you an example. If someone as a tester feels that there are too many bugs on a place where he or she didn't expect to have so many bugs on the system, which is focusing on the risk of having an area of the product that it's unstable in ways that we were not aware of. So we did not plan it accordingly. We do not have the enough resources in order to handle that. Well, these testers might not feel good about coming and pointing the finger to the development team saying, hey, these guys are not doing a good job. Okay, so because no one likes to be the bad guy in the team, they will report the bugs, they won't raise the flag. Make it easy for everyone to raise those flags anonymously and discreetly. Okay, have a Dropbox, okay, if you work the old-fashioned way, an email address if you want, a forum on the web that you can put, but make sure that people won't feel bad and won't feel that you're going to be screaming and shouting, hey, but he said, if someone comes up with a risk. Make sure that you're open as a risk manager to getting those risks and managing them correctly. Additional stuff, make sure that the risk meetings, and we're talking about the risk meeting, does not become a blame meeting. Okay, it's not about saying, hey, you did wrong, this is your risk, go ahead and handle it. The risk materialized, or the risk might get materialized. Once it's there, handle it. Don't blame. In the same way that retrospectives in projects should not be blame meetings, risk management meetings should not be blame meetings. And again, it's very important. The moment they become blame meetings, they become irrelevant. People will not come to them. They won't be good enough, and nothing good will come out of it. Okay. Another point that it's important. Oh, again, sorry for that. When in doubt, assume that history will repeat itself. And let me explain that a little bit. Sometimes people say, hey, I'm not sure if this will be a risk for this project or not, but I know from history that this type of technology was always a troublemaker. If you doubt it, assume that it will repeat itself. If it happened in the past, it will most certainly, or it can happen in the future or in the present. So assume it. Okay, it's a very good way of saying, hey, I don't know what other risks we have. Look in the history, try to see what happened in other projects, learn from them. And one of the things that I try to tell my QA leads or QA managers, there's a saying said that curiosity killed the cat, optimism is what killed the project. Okay, if something might go wrong, it will go wrong. Stuff that you didn't plan to go wrong will go wrong. So it's not for the optimist to be the risk manager. It's actually for the pessimist to be. And it's better to be wrong and have a contingency plan than to be an optimist and, again, be caught with your pants down and with nothing else to be able to do. Okay? So if you're being called an optimist, you're only doing your job right. And don't take it personally. It's people who don't really understand what's going on in there. Now, before we move into adding value to the QA management, again, using project risk, and then into the questions and answers. I want to share with you, again, something personal that happened to me. And this happened, I guess, about over 15 years ago. And it was my first company. I was working as a QA manager, and everyone in the company was actually pretty new. Okay, so every one of us was really young. No one really knew what's going on. It was before or during the first .com bubble, if someone was around there. Um, and what happened was that I had a pretty cool vice president of development. I was the director of quality there. And this guy comes and tells me, hey, you know what? I was reading about risk management, and it's something really cool that we can do. And I said, you know what? We're too busy. Forget about it. We manage risk all the time. We talk about them all the time. We don't really need to talk about them anymore. And well, you know what? Actually, he followed my advice, and we dropped risk management. And what happened was that we actually got very late into the project. It was a waterfall project, development cycles of about 9, 12 months, again, back in the day. And what happened was that towards the end of the project, we realized that a lot of the things that were happening were known before, and because we didn't manage them as risks, then they took a very big toll on the project. And so what we decided was that starting from our next project, then there would be a risk manager, and I actually took that role. And many of the advice that I'm sharing with you actually came from that role as a risk manager that I took back in the day. So first of all, not managing risks became a very big burden for our project. But then when I started managing the risk for my company in there, it actually helped me out to help my job as a QA director. The problem up to that point was that QA was the testing stuff that the kids came from school to do at the end of the day, and we were not being treated with so much respect. And once we actually started leading the part of the risk management within the company, then the rest of the management started understanding what we're doing in the QA, and we got a better voice if possible, and we actually made a bigger impact on what was going on in the team. So as I said, for those of you who don't have risk management, then this might be your golden ticket. This might be your opportunity to make sure and make your voice be heard. And you can take it as an initiative and start pushing it. And again, start from a small project, and then you can move into a bigger project. And one of the things to understand is that by nature, one of the things that I've seen is that QA manager might be the best choice for risk managers within their projects. And the reason for that, and you can share this with your managers if they don't understand that already, is that first of all, a person in the QA department has end-to-end visibility of all the project and the process. Okay, we see everything happening. We're not focused on a specific silo, and we're not seeing a specific feature. We're responsible for the end-to-end operation, and so we have pretty good visibility, not only on the project, but also on the process. Another thing that actually worked good for us, risks can come from different flavors. Sometimes they're going to be more technological, sometimes they're going to be more product. And so QA also has a very good balance between what needs to be learned from the technology side. Maybe you don't need to know how to code, but you understand what everything means over there. And obviously the business world, because you also need to understand your scenarios and what's important for your users. So we already have that balance that maybe the project manager doesn't have. This guy will know a lot about business, but not so much about tech. And so the developers might not share with them everything that they need to know. On the other hand, if you take a product owner or someone from the development, he might misinterpret, sorry for the English there, stuff of the business world and focus too much on the tech part. Okay, so it's important to have both of them. Most QA people are process oriented, okay, which means that we are very good at are looking forward into the process, understanding something might go wrong. And well, as QA people, we're seldom over optimistic. So that's not going to be a problem for us. Now, something that I'm not going to be writing here, but I mentioned at the beginning, I remember talking to someone who was telling me that a lot of QA people are actually, in one way or another, we have obsessive compulsive disorder, meaning we need to understand what's going on, we need to have full control about what's going on. And that's also something that will help you for a risk manager, because part of what we do is basically look into the future, and if something might go wrong, we want to know it right now and fix it right now. And this is basically what risk managers are doing all the time. Okay, so what I want to do right now with the help of Noah here next to me is to move over to the questions and answers part of the session. So I guess that we're going to start by questions that people were asking as the session went along. If you have other questions, then go ahead and write them right now. We're reviewing that, and obviously we're going to be answering the ones as you actually start asking them. Okay, I'm going over the questions here. Okay, there's a nice question here, and I guess that it's important because it explains where can you do risk management. And the question, I'm going to read it out loud. It says, is risk management something that needs to be done in a small team also? Or is it something focused on larger teams and larger projects? Well, as I said, that's a great question. I think that most people underestimate the complexity of smaller teams and smaller projects. I think that to answer the question, definitely you need to have risk management on small teams. Maybe you need to have risk management more than ever on small teams. And the reason for that is that whenever the team is small and people are all the time talking to one another, then you might be focusing on the wrong stuff. You might be focusing on the immediate stuff. You might be focusing on the stuff that someone thinks it's important, but we're not looking on perspective. We might be missing stuff that it's not trivial, and we need to see them. For example, if it's a small team focused on a specific feature, we might go very deeply into that feature and not realize that we're going to miss the whole project schedule because we're working 3 times as much or 4 times as much on that feature than what we planned before. Okay, so if your team is small, you still need to have risk management. It might be quicker, it might be more familiar, and might have less people obviously in there, but you need to have like a time when you stop, look around, understand if you have risks that might come into place and how to manage them, and make sure that everyone's synchronized on that. Another thing that it's important for small teams, and maybe a small team working on a big project, is that communication is as weird as it happens, less fluent. Because again, we think that we're talking all the time, but we actually are not. So something might be happening that I'm not aware of, even to the guy next to me. So you need to have that space in order to be able to know that it's working. And again, you're going to be having a lot of speed in smaller teams, so it's very important for you to understand if you're going to be having risks in there that need to be managed. So if you have a small team, that's no reason not to have risk management. Maybe it's going to be a more focused risk management effort, but it still needs to be there. Okay, so going to an additional question here. Okay, I'm going to go to an agile question here. It's a little bit about what we talked before. But it says here we work agile and we have a pretty good communication between everyone in the team. Should we still have all the parts of the risk management process you mentioned? Well, first of all, people working agile, and I said that before, they need to have risk management in place. I'm not sure that you will want to have all the parts that we talked about, but you might end up having other parts. And let me talk about that. When you're working on an agile team, and again, maybe on a Scrum process, and you have a unified team or a functional team where you have developers and testers and everyone on the same team working together, what usually happens is that you're going to be having 3, 4, 5, 7 of those teams working together in a project. So you might end up having risks that are within the team itself. And as I said, you might look into them as managing risk in a smaller team where you need to be aware of what's going on and stuff like that. But many of the risk would actually be on a team versus team basis. Okay, so if you're going to be having Scrum Masters having a Scrum of Scrums, where all the Scrum Masters actually sit once a day to talk about their internal Scrums, so that's one of the places where you also need to have a risk manager, and you need to have very good and careful attention to those risks that are going to be happening within the team. So it's going to be different as most things on Agile are, where you need to make sure that you're going to be focusing risk management correctly and not looking only into your individual team, what's going on, but look on a project basis and make sure that you know exactly what's going on a project by project basis, because most of the problems or the risks that we see on agile teams happen also on the integration between the work of the different teams working together. Okay, so I hope that answered that one. Or again, if I don't get to answer too much of those questions, please go ahead and send me an email. Share with you my email shortly, and you will be able to send to me by email here. Okay, another question here. Okay, there's a question here. If this is the same as issues and concerns section in a report, I guess this person is talking about a specific report they have, and they said in our report we have a section where we have issue name, issue type, owner, action plan, status, and remarks. It might be that. Remember, I'm going to go over to a specific slide that I have in here. Let me jump here very quickly. I was talking about two types of risks. Those types of tables usually are what it's called product risks, and they refer specifically to issues or to the bugs that you have in the system. And so you will have the type of bugs that you have, or the problems or stabilities, on who's the owner, or other stuff like that. It's usually for things that are already materialized. You do need to make sure that you're also talking here about potential risks. Okay, so if you have that kind of a section in your report, you may also want to add a section to that report that is talking about potential project risks in there as well, or potential project issues in there as well. Because many times what happens is that the team or the R&D team or development or whoever is there, they tells, hey, talk to me about stuff that already happened. Don't talk to me about stuff that might happen in the future. When it happens, we'll take care of that. But that's the wrong advice. Okay, that's like, as I said, driving blindfold on a street and say, hey, if I run into something, I'll check what I run into and then fix it. That's not the way that you should actually do it. So it might be close to that, but you also might be focusing only on product risks. So try to make sure that you're also focusing on project risk, and that's stuff that is going to be happening in the future here. Okay, we have here other questions. Actually, they're pretty interesting here. Let me just go ahead and read it. It says nowadays the QA future is not looking bright. If it's not technical as it was a couple of years ago, I guess that yes, the testing is turning a little bit more technical as it goes along, and risk management can actually help. And I guess this is more of a statement than a question, but it's a good statement. Meaning, one of the things that we need to understand is that testing is becoming a more technical job, and that's for truth. Okay, you don't need to be a coder, but you need to be technically proficient. You need to know how to read code. You need to know how to understand what's going on technologically, speaking on the team. And that's meaning risk management is another way of adding value to our teams, not only on the technical perspective, but more on the process perspective. So it's a good way of adding value, as I was saying. But having said that, that doesn't mean that if someone is a tester, you should not actually, and again, it's tangent to this session because we are talking about risk management, but if we're already talking about the capabilities that a tester needs to have, technical abilities are also a must. And you need to understand it's not something that is very hard to get. Okay, you don't need to be a coder, you don't need to write complex scripts or codes. You simply need to understand what's going on from a technical perspective. Having said that, risk management is something that will help you to increase the value of yourself as a tester or as a QA manager. And you're not doing it artificially. You're doing it with something that is very, very valuable and very needed in most projects, specifically on projects that we're running right now, where we don't have room for faults, meaning we need to release products very quickly, and we don't have a lot of room or time for faulty stuffing. Okay, I think we have time for one or two more questions. Let me go here. Okay, there's a question here. Trying to understand here for a second. Why is the project manager not a good person for risk management if he or she has a better vision on project risk and more close communication with the stakeholders? Also, this person is responsible for the project, and so he's also responsible for the risks in there. It's a good question. Meaning, it's a question of who's actually managing the risks, and if it should be the project owner, or the project manager, or the QA person in the team. Let me take it back one step. My wife's actually a project manager in a company. Okay, so we talk a lot about testing. We talk a lot about projects. Many times, the project manager is way too busy handling the fires that they need to put out on the same place. Okay, project managers might just be all the time trying to make sure that everyone's communicating, And even if it is correct that maybe traditionally speaking, the project manager should actually be the risk manager, many times this is not the case. Okay, many times they don't have the time for that. But no need to go so far, meaning leave my wife outside of this and notice the answers that people had. More than half the people taking part in this webinar either don't know if they have risk management, which means that, well, obviously they don't have. If they would have had, they would know about it, or don't have risk management at all. So if the person who should be doing risk management, even if you agree on that, I don't, that it should be the project manager is not doing it, then why not making sure that the tester does it? We still have the end-to-end visibility. We still need to know what the project is about. If not, we cannot test or prepare test cases for. And again, we have advantages that the project manager doesn't have. The project manager is very much into the business world, but all the technical knowledge, or most of it, will come from trusting the people who are actually building the code, and sometimes that's bad. And again, project managers, they have the pressure that they need to deliver on time. And so sometimes they try to be optimistic. Sometimes they try to see a sunny day, even though it's a cloudy day outside. So on that case, also the QA person has an advantage of that. Having said that, you don't need to fight over it. If you have a project manager who's already doing risk management, you can come and say, hey, I want to cooperate. I want to be part of it. Let's work together. I'm going to bring my part. You're going to bring your part, and let's do it together in the system. It also works out perfectly. Just make sure that it's being done, because many times it's not being done. Okay, I have only one more question here that I can take. And I'm going to be taking this one. What's the difference between risk management and risk-based testing? Okay, it's a nice question. And I'm going to go back into the slide that I showed a couple seconds ago. And it's this slide in here. Let's start first of all about, once again, the question, what's the difference between risk management and risk-based testing? First of all, let's define what risk-based testing is, okay, for those of you who might not know it. And risk-based testing means that you're going to try to understand what are the risks that you have in your project and plan your test cases based on those risks. And it comes from the very simple fact that you're obviously not going to be having time to test everything in your features or in your project or in your process. So you need to pinpoint specific stuff that you want to test. And so you start from the new functionality or the areas of your regression that are usually that tend to have more bugs or that are more important. So you're going to be choosing what parts of your project to test. If you think about it, risk-based testing is the process that you're going to be doing in order to lower the risk of having product risks. Okay, you're saying, okay, so I think that some parts of my project are not going to be stable. They're going to have bugs. They're not going to become working together. So I'm going to be focusing my test on them. Okay, these are your prevention techniques, your mitigation techniques. You're going to be planning your testing based on that. By the way, you might also plan your process based on that. You might say, hey, I know that these are very risky places. I want to test it before. I want them to be delivered before by the development team. But if you work only based on risk-based testing, then you're missing all the project risks. Okay, you're talking here about stuff that people seldom don't take a look into it, and it's not related to testing, not related to testing at all. To give you a couple of examples, let's say that you're going into a project that you assume that it would take you 4 months to develop it. Okay, now you finish your second month of development and you realize that your developers have only finished a fourth of the project, which means that they have another fourth to provide you, so you're running late. It's not related to tests, but it's still a project risk. Another thing might be that I don't know, you have a 2-week schedule, and all of a sudden, one of the most critical parts of your team is actually telling you that he needs to go on an urgent trip for a family issue somewhere, and he's not going to be here for the next 10 days. That's another risk that you're going to be having there. Risks might be related to bugs, but they're not always related to bugs. They're usually related to delays, to bad estimates, to stuff that's happening around the project that people need to take a look, and make sure that something's being done about it. Okay, you know what? Let me give you another example. It's a great example, actually. I remember working on a project that we needed to test the system on, well, very, very big computer over there. I remember it was about 10 years ago. And we needed to get that computer from the US into Israel on time. And it took about 4 weeks to be delivered. What happened was that we actually planned for that computer to be delivered on time. But when the computer got to Israel, it actually had a bug on it. The processor was not working good enough. So we needed to get another computer, and it was another 4 weeks. So all of a sudden, we had a very big risk that it was related to the hardware that was not in place in order to make the test cases, which means that when we get the computer, it might be too late in order for us to find the bugs and fix them. So that became a very, very big risk, and we needed to find alternatives for that. And we ended up flying a couple of engineers to another site on another country to test it on those computers because it was too much of a risk for that. Okay, so it's not a bug. We did not have bugs in there, but it was something that might have affected the project so much that we needed to do something about it before it actually became a problem or became a bug. Okay, so if you think about risk-based testing, it's a way to mitigate product risks, but you also have tons of project risks that still need mitigating, still need to be controlled, and again, continue moving forward. Okay, so I've been told that we need to start finishing up. So first of all, and again, remember about PractiTest was actually sponsoring these webinars, and if you want to learn more about it, get in touch with us, and we'll be more than happy to share that information with you and to teach you about PractiTest and how you can actually use it in your project and your testing. And well, I wanted to thank you for taking part of this session. I hope that it was useful, and I hope that you can start doing risk management right now. If you have any questions, anything that I can do for you, this is my personal email address, joel@practice.com. Go ahead and send me an email. I'll be more than happy to help you out with that. And again, also I mentioned at the beginning, we have the state of testing survey. Go ahead and read it. We had a lot of insightful information. You can reach it from our QA blog, which is at qablog.practice.com. So guys, thank you very much for your time. I hope that it was useful for you guys. And again, we'll be in touch with you in our next webinar next month. Thank you very much and have a great day. Bye-bye.